And so we settle in. You can feel your body beginning to grow heavy in the most pleasant way. In our time together tonight, there is nothing to examine, nothing to understand, only the gentle rhythm of a story. A story about a book that was, perhaps, never meant for you to read. A book that holds its silence so perfectly, it has become louder than any words. Before we drift too far, if you feel a connection to this place, you're welcome to leave a quiet like or subscribe. Think of it not as a task, but as leaving a soft footprint in the sand before you continue your journey inward. Your peaceful presence here is what truly matters. And if you feel so inclined, you could even leave a quiet comment, letting me know which city and at what time you're listening tonight. It's a nice way to feel the quiet company of others, all settling down across the world. And so find that gentle darkness in your room, perhaps with a soft blanket pulled a little closer, as we begin our slow drift into tonight's tale. The air is thick and warm, smelling of ancient dust, cypress trees, and the faint, sweet scent of sun-baked stone. It's 1912, and you're standing on a hill outside of Rome, at a sprawling estate called the Villa Mandragoni. It's a place that has seen better days. Once a grand summer residence for popes, its frescoes are now faded, its vast gardens a little overgrown. For now, it's a Jesuit college, and the men who live here are well, they're a little short on cash. Your name is Wilfred Voynich. You're a man of many lives, a one-time Polish revolutionary, an exile, and now a respected dealer of rare and antique books. You have a knack for finding forgotten treasures in dusty corners of Europe, and you have a feeling this villa has corners that haven't been swept in a century or two. The Jesuit fathers, aware of your reputation and their own dwindling finances, have granted you access to their library, hoping you might find something worth buying. You've spent hours sifting through predictable theological treatises and brittle stacks of correspondence. It's mostly dross. Your hopes are beginning to fade, much like the afternoon sun slanting through the tall, grimy windows. Then a Jesuit father, perhaps sensing your disappointment, leads you to a less formal part of the archives. A storage room, really, and in it, he gestures towards a large, carved wooden chest, a cassone, as the Italians call it. He leads you to it. The air in the room is still and heavy. With a creak of old hinges, you lift the lid. Inside, nestled amongst other manuscripts, is something small, something different. It's not a grand, leather-bound tome. It's a modest little book, about the size of a modern paperback, its cover made of smooth, pale vellum. There is no title, no author, no markings at all. You pick it up. It feels cool and light in your hands. The vellum is supple, almost like skin. It is a profoundly quiet object. While the other books in the chest shout their purpose, this is a Bible. This is a ledger, this one just waits. It holds its secrets close. Now, this is the story you will tell, at least. It's a fantastic tale, full of romance and drama. The dusty villa, the secret chest, the moment of discovery. It's the kind of story a brilliant showman and salesman would craft. And historians will. They still argue about this part. Did you really stumble upon it so cinematically? Or was it a far more mundane transaction? Perhaps a pragmatic Jesuit father, knowing its value was unusual, simply presented it to you as part of a lot you were purchasing. We will likely never know for sure, as your account is the only one that exists. The discovery of the book is, itself, the first of its many mysteries. But in this room, in this moment, the story is true enough for you. You can feel a peculiar energy humming from this little book. It's the thrill of the unknown. The Jesuits, you learn, need money to repair the villa. You need this book. A deal is struck. A deal is struck. You purchase a bundle of manuscripts. This strange, signed volume buried among them, ensuring no one pays it too much attention. You carry it out of the Villa Mandragoni, feeling the weight of it, not just in your bag, but in your mind. The sun is setting, casting long, soft shadows across the Italian countryside. You have it. You have rescued a secret from a dusty chest. What you don't know yet is that you haven't rescued a secret at all. You have just become its newest keeper. The book hasn't been unlocked. You have simply been locked in with it. You don't dare open it on the train. A discovery like this feels private, intimate. So you wait until you are back in your study, late at night. The city outside is a distant hum. The gas lamp on your desk casts a warm, golden pool of light, and the only sound is the soft ticking of a clock on the mantelpiece. You pour a small glass of something amber and place the book in the center of the light. For a long moment, you just look at its cover. That smooth, pale vellum. It feels ancient but not frail. It has a strange durability to it. Taking a slow breath, you gently untie the simple cord that holds it shut and open it to the first page. And there it is. The silence finds a voice, but it's one you cannot understand. The page is filled with script. It's not the cramped, spiky Gothic lettering you're used to seeing in medieval manuscripts. This is different. It's elegant, flowing, almost alive. The script is written with a confident, unbroken hand from left to right, organized neatly into paragraphs. Just like any normal European book. It looks like a real language. It has rhythm. You lean closer, your nose almost touching the parchment. Some of the characters, or glyphs as you might call them, look vaguely familiar. You see shapes that are almost a Latin C or O or N. But they're always slightly off, adorned with a little flourish or an extra stroke that makes them alien. And then there are the others. The strange ones. There are characters that look like tiny, ornate gallows, some with one loop, some with one loop, some with two. There are symbol, but resemble little benches, or keys, or a strange combination of numbers. It's as if someone took a dozen different alphabets, threw them in a pot, stirred them with a magical stick, and then wrote a whole book with the results. Your first thought, of course, is that it's a cipher, a code. This is hardly unusual. You've handled coded documents before. During the Renaissance, when this book was likely made, ciphers were all the rage. Popes, princes, spies, and even natural philosophers used them to protect their secrets, their political schemes, or their controversial discoveries from prying eyes. This is a well-known fact. Your secret diary of a forgotten cardinal. A lost work of alchemy. The potential is intoxicating. The value could be immense. You, a man who has outsmarted terrorists' secret police, are not intimidated. You begin the basic work of a cryptographar. You scan the text for patterns. You look for repeated words, and there are many. Certain combinations of glyphs appear over and over again. You look for single-letter words which in English might be O or I. You look for common endings and beginnings. You are hunting for a crack in the wall. But the wall is perfectly smooth. The more you look, the more baffling it becomes, and you start to notice something truly odd. Something that sends a little shiver down your spine. The script is too clean. This is the strange little detail that whispers of something more profound. When a scribe in the 15th century wrote with the quillant ink, they made mistakes. They would smudge the ink, blot the page, cross out a word, or write a small correction in the margin. It was unavoidable. But this booklet has almost no corrections. The text flows from the quill of the anonymous author, as if they were taking effortless dictation, writing in a language they knew as well as their own name, without a moment's hesitation or a single second thought. It is unavingwam perfect, and this is where the great debate, the one that will occupy scholars for the next 100 years, truly begins. Is this a fantastically complex cipher, designed by a genius to be unbreakable? Or is it something else? A real language, perhaps, written in its own unique script, whose key has been lost to the unforgiving sands of time? Or, and this is a thought you almost don't want to have, is it all just gibberish? A meaningless, elaborate hoax created to fool a wealthy patron? The question hangs there in the quiet of your study. You lean back in your chair, the page before you a beautiful, confounding puzzle. The script doesn't look like nonsense, it has the cadence and flow of meaning. You can almost hear the ghost of a voice behind the letters. But the voice is speaking a language from a dream, and you are frustratingly, completely awake. The text refuses to give you a single clue. You realize you've been staring at the same paragraph for half an hour, and you're no closer to understanding it than when you first opened the cover. Frustrated, you decide to change tactics. If the words won't speak to you, maybe the pictures will. You begin to turn the pages. You turn the page, and the quiet confusion of the script gives way to a vibrant, almost shocking, visual landscape. The book, it seems, is an illustrated one, but these are not the illustrations you were expecting. No pious saints, no noble coats of arms. Instead, you find yourself in a garden of the impossible. This section, which will one day be called the herbal section by future researchers, is a botanical encyclopedia of plants that have never grown on Earth. Page after page is dedicated to a single large, colorful drawing of a plant, from its roots to its flowers, with that same, maddeningly unreadable text flowing around it. At first glance, they look plausible. They have stems, leaves, roots, flowers. They are drawn with a confident, observational quality, as if the artist was looking directly at a real specimen. But the longer you look, the more your sense of reality begins to warp. You see a plant with the delicate, feathery leaves of a fern, but sprouting from its center is a flower that looks like a cluster of tiny, blue and yellow suns. Another page shows a plant with a thick, gnarled root system that twists and butts into itself like a tangle of sleeping serpents. From this root grows a single, straight stem that culminates not in a flower, but in what looks like a miniature, perfectly rendered green castle, complete with tiny towers and archways. You keep turning. Here is a plant whose petals are shaped like purple feathers. Here is one whose leaves are a brilliant crimson, veined with what looks like pure gold. Many of the plants are composites, chimeras of the botanical world. You recognize the leaf of an oak, but it's attached to the stem of a lily. You see the seed pod of a poppy, but it's growing on a plant that looks more like a seaweed. It's as if the artist had a deep and intimate knowledge of botany, and then used that knowledge to build a whole new creation, piece by piece, like a child building with blocks they've stolen from a dozen different toy sets. The colors are still remarkably vivid: bright blues, deep greens, rich reds, and earthy ochres. They have been painted with a simple but effective palette. And this brings up a small, practical detail that often gets lost in the grand mystery: the paint itself. Later analysis will show the paints were made from common, inexpensive materials available in the 15th century. Crushed minerals, plant extracts. There's nothing exotic about them. It's a humble detail that makes the fantastical imagery even more jarring. The artist was using the most ordinary of means to depict the most extraordinary of subjects. You pause on one drawing in particular. It's a slender, elegant plant. Its stem is a delicate blue, and it rises to a flower that is a perfect six-pointed star. But coming off the main stem are side shoots, and at the end of each one is not a leaf, but a tiny, human-like face, drawn in profile with a serene, almost blank expression. What on earth is this? Is it a symbolic representation? A memory of a dream? Or is it a depiction of a plant that once existed, but is now extinct? This is a thought that will be seriously considered by some researchers. The idea that this manuscript might be the only surviving record of a lost ecosystem, a botanical world wiped out by some known, forgotten catastrophe. It's a romantic and compelling theory, though most mainstream botanists would, and still do, scoff at it. The purpose of this section seems obvious. It's a herbal, a book detailing plants and their properties, a common type of text in the Middle Ages and Renaissance. But a herbal is meant to be useful. It's a guide for physicians, apothecaries, and even cooks. You're supposed to be able to go out into the woods, find the plant, and use it. But you can't find these plants in any wood on earth. A herbal of imaginary plants is not just useless, it's a paradox. It's a cookbook full of recipes that use ingredients that don't exist. As you look at these beautiful, nonsensical plants, a new layer of unease settles over you. The script was a lock without a key. This is a map to a country that isn't on the map. The book isn't just silent, it's actively misleading you, showing you things that feel real but can't be. It's creating a world in its pages, a world that follows its own strange logic. And as you continue to turn the pages, you realize this garden of impossible flowers is only the first stop, much stranger, leaving the impossible garden behind. You venture deeper into the manuscript. The pages suddenly shift from the botanical to the astronomical, and you find yourself looking up at the heavens, or at least a version of the heavens. If the plant section was a gentle warping of reality, this section is a full-blown carnival funhouse mirror. You're looking at circular diagrams, mandalas of intricate design that immediately bring to mind zodiac charts and astronomical calendars. This is familiar territory for a student of old manuscripts. Astrology and astronomy were considered two sides of the same coin in the 15th century. Understanding the movements of the stars was crucial for everything from medicine to agriculture to predicting the fortunes of kings. So a section on the cosmos is not surprising. You see a large circular chart, beautifully drawn, depicting the familiar signs of the zodiac. There's a ram for Aries, a bull for Taurus, a set of twins for Gemini, but they're different. The bull has an odd, almost placid expression, more like a pet cow than a powerful celestial beast. The twins of Gemini aren't the heroic Castor and Pollux myth. They look like two ordinary, slightly bored children. Then, surrounding the zodiac ring, are other concentric circles filled with more oddities. In the outermost ring of one chart, instead of stars or planets, there is a procession of tiny, naked figures, each holding a star. It's not clear if they are offering the stars, or if they are some kind of celestial beings themselves. They just stand there, dozens of them, circling the entire diagram. You turn to another page. This one seems to depict the sun and moon. A large, golden sun sits in the center of the page, its rays drawn as perfectly straight, unwavering lines. But the sun has a face. Not the benign, smiling face of a storybook sun. This one is ambiguous, its expression unreadable, almost stern. Opposite it is a moon, but it's not the serene silver crescent you'd expect. It's a strange blotchy blue, and its face looks worried, almost frightened. This is where the first real note of what some might call a creepy feeling begins to settle in. It's not overt, but it's there. The weirdness is starting to feel less like whimsical fantasy and more like a system of thought that is deeply, fundamentally alien to you. It's like listening to someone hum a tune that is almost familiar, but all the key notes are wrong, turning a pleasant melody into something discordant and unsettling. And then there's the centerpiece of the astronomical section, a stunning, fold-out page with a massive, elaborate circular diagram. This one chart has baffled scholars more than almost any other single page. It contains what appear to be 9 or possibly more interlocking spheres or islands in the sky, connected by what look like causeways or pipelines. Each sphere is filled with more stars, more unreadable text, and more of those strange little figures. Is it a map of the universe, a diagram of a metaphysical realm, a schematic for some bizarre cosmic machine? Here, the debate among future researchers will become particularly heated. Is this a genuine attempt at cosmology, filtered through a completely unknown belief system? Some will argue it represents an early, pre-Copernican model of the universe we have no other record of. Or is it, as others will vehemently claim, just astrobabble, a series of pretty pictures designed to look profound, like an alchemist's diagram, but ultimately devoid of any real scientific or philosophical meaning? The argument of genius cipher versus genius hoax gets a lot of fuel from these pages. You trace the lines of the great fold-out chart with your finger. You notice a small, almost hidden detail. In one of the connecting tubes between the cosmic spheres, there's a tiny drawing of what looks like a dragon's head. It's not prominent. It's a detail you could easily miss. It has no obvious symbolic purpose. It just is. This little dragon head is a perfect example of a peculiar, unhelpful fact about the manuscript. For every grand, baffling question it poses, it offers a dozen tiny, baffling details. It's a mystery wrapped in an enigma, and both are covered in a fine powder of pure, undiluted strangeness. You feel a sense of intellectual vertigo. The book is showing you a version of the universe that doesn't operate by any rules you know. The plants were from an imaginary heaven. You are an explorer who is not from an imaginary heaven. You are an explorer who has not owned his compass, but has also discovered that north, south, east, and west have been rearranged into directions for which you have no names. You carefully fold the large chart back into the book. It's time to see what other wonders, or horrors, this silent little volume has in store. You turn the page from the unsettling star charts and land squarely in the most infamous and puzzling section of the entire manuscript. This is the part that will truly cement the book's reputation for high weirdness. Later researchers will label it the balneological section, a fancy word derived from the Latin for bath, because that's what it appears to be about bathing, but these are no ordinary baths. The pages are now dominated by elaborate, interconnected systems of pipes, tubes, and pools, flowing with a strange, greenish-blue liquid. And in this liquid, bathing, standing, and socializing, are dozens and dozens of small, naked female figures. They are drawn simply, almost like graceful cartoons. They have rounded bellies, small breasts, and their hair is often styled in elaborate, fashionable 15th century coifs. They are, to put it mildly, just hanging out. The scene is utterly bizarre. It's as if you've stumbled upon the plumbing schematics for a surreal medieval water park or a fantastical spa. In one illustration, you see a massive, crown-shaped basin at the top of the page, from which the green liquid flows down through a series of channels into smaller, pod-like pools below. In each pool, a group of these women seems to be chatting, gesturing, or holding onto the strange, organic-looking pipework. The atmosphere isn't lewd or titillating. It's clinical, communal, strangely serene. The figures seem comfortable, at ease in their weird, verdant world. Some hold what look like flowers or other botanical specimens from the herbal section of the book. Others seem to be pointing at things or talking to one another. Their purpose is a complete mystery. Are they nymphs? Are they human? Is this a depiction of a medical treatment, a fertility ritual, or a religious ceremony? You pause on a particularly complex two-page spread. It shows a fantastic network of pipes that seem to flow directly from the centers of the celestial diagrams you just saw on the previous pages. The green liquid appears to be some kind of celestial fluid, flowing down from the heavens to fill these pools on Earth. And sitting in the pools, the women seem to be absorbing this cosmic goo. It's a vision that connects the stars to the body in a way that is both deeply strange and strangely intuitive. This, right here, is what makes the book so unique. There is nothing else like it in the entire historical record of medieval or Renaissance art. Absolutely nothing. This is a point that nearly all historians agree upon. While you can find parallels for the herbal and astronomical sections in other manuscripts, this sparse action is a complete outlier. It seems to have been born from a mind, or a culture, with a visual language all its own. And what about the goo? That green liquid. What is it? A very specific and very weird cold case-style clue comes from this. Some researchers, centuries later, will analyze the pigments used. They'll discover that while the red, brown, and yellow paints are stable, the blue and green pigments were made from less permanent materials. Over time, the blues have tended to fade or flake away more than the other colors. This leads to a quirky but fascinating theory. What if the liquid wasn't originally green? What if it was once a clear, vibrant blue, and what we see as green today is actually the result of the blue pigrading and mixing with the yellowish hue of the aging vellum beneath it? Imagine that the mysterious green goo might just be a chemical accident, a 500-year-old magic trick played by time itself. You look at the faces of the little figures. They are not detailed portraits. They are almost identical, more like symbols of women than depictions of individuals. They seem to represent a collective, not a cast of characters. And they are all women, or at least, they are all depicted as such. There are no men in the green goo. The combination of subjects is profoundly jarring. You have a book that contains a pharmacopoeia of imaginary plants, a map of an alien cosmos, and now a guide to a supernatural spot treatment. It's as if three completely different, very strange books were shuffled together by a mad librarian. You try to find a narrative, a connection. Is the book a guide for women's health? Using plants from the herbal section and astrological timing from the celestial charts to inform these strange hydrotherapeutic rituals? It's a plausible theory, and one that many will champion. But it doesn't quite fit. The feeling you get is not of a practical guide, but of a philosophical one. The book isn't telling you how to do something. It feels like it's explaining how something is. This is the system. This is the world. The stars flow, the people bathe. It's a closed loop, a perfect, self-contained universe. And you are just a tourist, pressing your face against the glass, unable to read the signposts. You move on from the bathing ladies, your mind still swirling with the image of that strange green liquid. The next set of pages feels slightly more grounded, but only slightly. This section is what future scholars will dub the pharmaceutical or biological part, and it looks, at first glance, like the sort of thing you might find in an apothecary's private notebook. The layout changes. Instead of large, full-page illustrations, these pages are lined with smaller drawings. You see what are clearly roots, leaves, seed pods, and other bits of parts, often depicted with a striking level of detail. They look like specimens laid out on a table for study. Next to each little drawing is a label, written in that same flowing, incomprehensible script. It's the most direct link you've seen yet between a specific object and a specific block of text, strongly suggesting these are, in fact, names or descriptions. But right away the familiar weirdness creeps back in. Many of these plant parts don't seem to belong to the grand, fantastical plants you saw in the herbal section. This is a whole new set of botanical oddities. You see a gnarled, ginger-like root that seems to have tiny, almost human eyes. You see a leaf that is perfectly symmetrical, looking more like a decorative tile than something that grew on a tree. Then you see the jars. Scattered among the plant parts are drawings of what are unmistakably apothecary jars. They are the kind of containers a 15th century pharmacist would use to store herbs, spices, powders, and mysterious concoctions. They are drawn with care, some squat and wide, others tall and slender. They look real. They look functional. And on the side of each jar is a label again, written in Voynich ESE, as the script will one day be called. You feel you are looking at a shelf in a long-lost laboratory. This jar holds powdered unicorn horn. This one, the essence of a sunbeam. The text almost seems to be teasing you, offering the clearest context yet, while withholding the actual meaning. This section offers a fascinatedly mundane detail that speaks volumes about the book's creation. Unlike the grand, colorful illustrations, many of the drawings here are uncolored, simple line drawings made with brown ink. This has led some to a very practical conclusion: the manuscript might be unfinished. The theory goes that the creator drew all the outlines first, intending to go back and paint them in later, but for some reason, they never got around to this section. It's a very human touch in a very inhuman feeling book. A project started with grand ambitions, but left incomplete. It's a reminder that behind all the mystery was a person, holding a quill with a limited amount of time and, perhaps, a limited budget for expensive paints. The recipes section follows the jars. Here, the pages are filled almost entirely with text, but it's broken up into small paragraphs, each one marked with a little star or flower-like bullet point in the margin. This format screams recipe book. Each entry seems to be an instruction. Take two parts of the unreadable root, grind it with the unknowable leaf, boil it in the mysterious liquid, and you will get what? A cure for melancholy. A potion to make you fly. The frustration is immense. It's like finding the private notebook of a brilliant scientist, but all the key terms have been replaced with nonsense words. The grammar is there. The structure is there. The meaning is a perfect void. And it is in this section that one of the most compelling linguistic arguments about the script's nature is born. Researchers will one day perform a statistical analysis of the text in these recipe-like entries. They will discover that certain words, certain glyph combinations, appear almost exclusively in this section. Furthermore, they'll find that some words tend to appear only at the beginning of a paragraph, and others only in the middle. Think of an English cookbook. Words like take, add, mix, bake will appear in specific, predictable places. Ingredients will be at the top, instructions in the middle. The language of the manuscript appears to follow these same kinds of structural, domain-specific rules. This is a powerful argument against the hoax theory. Faking this level of subtle linguistic consistency over hundreds of pages would be the work of a staggering, almost superhuman genius. You stare at the recipe-like paragraphs. You see the little stars in the margins, the neatly separated entries. It all looks so orderly, so rational. And yet, it communicates nothing. It's the perfect imitation of knowledge. You are now convinced this isn't just doodles. There is a system here. A powerful, intelligent, and deeply ordered mind created this book. But for whom? And why? The book's physical presence is here in your hands, but its intellectual content, its very soul, remains completely out of reach. You feel like a ghost in a library, able to see the books, but unable to turn the pages or read the words. Having seen the plants, the stars, the baths, and the recipes, you return to the most fundamental problem, the script itself. You close the book for a moment, the images swimming in your mind, and decide to approach this as a pure puzzle of language. You must have missed something. There must be a key. You are not alone in this feeling. In the century to come, the manuscript will fall into the hands of some of the most brilliant minds in cryptography. People who have cracked far more famous and historically significant codes. And one by one, they will all walk away, humbled and defeated. First, there are the World War I code breakers. Men like William Friedman, the legendary American cryptographer who lead the team that broke Japan's purple cipher, a feat that changed the course of the war. He dedicated years of his retirement to the Voynich manuscript, filled with the confidence of a man who had bested the most complex military codes ever devised. He, like you, started with the basics frequency analysis. In any given language, some letters appear more often than others. E is the king. Friedman and his team painstakingly transcribed the Voynich script, assigning symbols to each glyph, and counted them. And they found patterns, absolutely. The script obeys something called Zipf's law, a statistical rule that governs most, if not all, human languages. In simple terms, it means the most frequent word would appear about twice as often as the second most frequent word, 3 times as often as the third, and so on. The Voynich script follows this law perfectly. This is a massive point in the real language column. It's incredibly difficult to fake this property. Most hoaxes or gibberish generators create text that is either too random or too repetitive. The Voynich script sits in that perfect, natural language sweet spot. But this discovery only deepens the mystery. The patterns are there, but they don't lead anywhere. For instance, some words are repeated 2, 3, even 4 times in a row. Formations like QO, using a placeholder alphabet are common. This is highly unusual in any known European language. What does it mean? Is it for emphasis? Is it a feature of the numbering system? Or is it just weird? Then there is the strange case of the entropy of the script. This is a fancy way of talking about how predictable the text is. In English, if you see the letter Q, you are almost certain the next letter will be U. The entropy is low. The Voynich script has an entropy lower than Latin but higher than English. It's more structured than a random jumble, but it also has some very strange and rigid rules. For example, certain characters can only appear at the beginning of a word, others can only appear at the end. Some characters are never, ever seen next to each other, as if they were mortal enemies. This intricate system of rules is one of the main reasons cryptographers believe it's not a simple substitution cipher, where one symbol simply equals one letter. And this leads us to one of the most debated and delightfully nerdy arguments in the entire Voynich saga, the verbose cipher versus the lost language theory. Is it a known language, like Latin or a dialect of German, that has been deliberately obscured by a complex multi-step code? Or is it a language that we have no other record of, written in its own unique script? Think of it this way: are you trying to decode a secret message, or are you trying to translate a dead language from scratch, with no Rosetta Stone to help you? Historians and linguists are still fiercely divided on this point, and their arguments fill entire forums and academic papers. Here's a small, weird fact that codebreakers noticed: there are almost no words in the manuscript that are shorter than 3 letters or longer than 10. Most known languages have plenty of very short words, I, is, to, and some very long ones. The Voynich script seems to live in a perpetual medium-length world. Why? Is it a feature of the language, or a deliberate feature of the code designed to frustrate statistical analysis? You, sitting in your study in 1912, don't have supercomputers or teams of analysts. You have your eyes, your mind, and your experience, and what you experience is a growing sense of awe at the mind that created this. To construct a system of this complexity, with so many layers of rules, so much internal consistency, and to do it so flawlessly over 240 pages. The creator was not just a scribe, they were an architect of language. You realize you cannot solve this alone. The book is too big a mystery for one person. It needs more eyes, more minds. It needs to be brought out of the shadows, and to do that, you need to understand where it came from. You need to trace its history to follow the ghostly trail of its previous owners. The hunt for the book's meaning is stalled. The hunt for its past is about to begin. The book itself may be silent, but its physical form has a story to tell. To uncover it, you must become a detective, and your first clue is a faint, faded signature on the very first page. It's barely visible, but under the right light, you can make out a name: Jacobus D. Neck. This is your first real lead, a thread pulling you back through the centuries, out of your quiet study and into the heart of one of the strangest and most fascinating courts in European history. The name Jacobus D. Neck, you discover, belongs to a 17th century figure who was the head of the botanical gardens for the Holy Roman Emperor, Rudolf II. And with the mention of that name, Rudolf II, the story suddenly lights up. Let's travel back to the late 16th and early 17th century. The place is Prague, and the man in charge is one of the most eccentric rulers Europe has ever seen. Rudolf II was not a man who cared for politics or war, or the boring day-to-day business of running an empire. He was a collector, a recluse, a man obsessed with the occult, with alchemy, with astrology, and with the acquisition of curious and wonderful objects. His castle in Prague wasn't just a seat of power. It was a vast cabinet of curiosities, a wonderland filled with exotic animals, strange mechanical automata, priceless works of art, and, most importantly for our story, thousands and thousands of books on esoteric subjects. You can picture his court. It wasn't filled with generals and stuffy ambassadors. It was a magnet for the brilliant, the strange, and the fraudulent from all over Europe. Alchemists promising to turn lead into gold worked in castle laboratories. Astrologers charted the emperor's fate in the stars. Mystics claimed to speak with angels. It was a place where science and magic were not yet separate things, where a brilliant astronomer like Johannes Kepler could work alongside a charlatan selling philosopher's stones. It was, in short, the absolute perfect environment for a book like the Voynich Manuscript to appear. Your investigation unearths a crucial piece of correspondence. It's a letter from a man named Johannes Marcus Marci, a scientist from Prague, written in 1666. The letter was found tucked inside the book's cover when the Jesuits you bought it from had it. In this letter, Marci explains that he is sending the sleeper, as he calls the book, to a Jesuit scholar in Rome. He says the book once belonged to Emperor Rudolf II, who purchased it for the handsome sum of 600 gold ducats. That was an enormous amount of money, the price of a large estate, suggesting the emperor believed it held secrets of immense value. The letter also mentions that Rudolf believed the author of the manuscript was Roger Bacon, the famous 13th century English friar and proto-scientist. Bacon was a legendary figure, rumored to have known all the secrets of nature, and his name was often attached to mysterious texts to give them an air of ancient, powerful wisdom. Most modern historians, however, dismiss the Roger Bacon theory. Carbon dating, a technology you can only dream of, will eventually prove the book was made in the 15th century, a good 200 years after Bacon's time. So the emperor was likely misled, but the trail to Rudolf is solid. The book was in his possession. You can imagine him, a melancholic and increasingly paranoid figure, secluded in his castle, turning the pages of this strange little book by candlelight. Did he understand it? Did he have a secret key now lost? Or was he, like everyone else, simply captivated by its beautiful, impenetrable mystery? This connection to the emperor raises an interesting and slightly awkward question. If the book was so valuable to the emperor, how did it end up with Jacobus D. Neck, his head of botanical gardens? Here, historians offer a plausible, if not entirely flattering theory. As Rudolf II grew more reclusive and his mental health declined, his court began to prey on him. Courtiers, artists, and officials started borrowing items from his vast collections, either as payment for services or simply because they knew the emperor was no longer paying attention. It's quite possible that Neck, upon the emperor's death or during his final chaotic years, simply took the book from the royal library. A little bit of historical looting, if you will. It's a common enough story in the courts of kings. So now you have a geographical and historical anchor. Prague, around the year 1600, the court of a magic-obsessed emperor. The pieces are starting to form a picture. The book's journey didn't begin with you in a dusty villa. It once sat in one of the most famous libraries in the world, owned by a man who desperately wanted to unlock the secrets of the universe. The thought is humbling. The Holy Roman Emperor, with all his resources, his alchemists, and his mystics, failed to read this book. Now it's your turn. You feel a strange kinship with the long-dead emperor, another man staring into the beautiful, silent void of the Voynich manuscript. The trail is now warm, leading you directly into the heart of Rudolf in Prague. So let's leave your study for a moment and walk those streets. The year is, say, 1590th. The air in Prague is thick with the smell of coal smoke, roasting meat, and something else, a faint, metallic tang of strange experiments, the scent of burning herbs from an alchemist's workshop. You walk on cobblestones that are slick with rain, dodging horse-drawn carts and merchants hawking their wares. The city is a labyrinth of narrow, twisting alleys that snake between tall Gothic buildings, their spires reaching up into a perpetually grey sky. This is not the clean, tourist-friendly Prague of the modern era. This is a place of deep shadows and glittering secrets. Your destination is the Hradčany Castle, a vast complex looming over the city. This is where Emperor Rudolf II has gathered his collection of mines. You pass through the gates and enter a world that is part royal court, part university, and part circus. In one courtyard, you might see Tycho Brahe, the great Danish astronomer with a prosthetic nose made of brass, arguing with his assistant, Johannes Kepler, about the orbit of Mars. Their work here will lay the foundations for modern astronomy. But just a few doors down in a dimly lit laboratory, you'll find a different kind of science at work. This is the domain of the alchemists. Here, men with long beards and soot-stained fingers tend to bubbling alembic-escent glowing furnaces. They are obsessed with the magnum opus, the great work, the creation of the philosopher's stone, a mythical substance that could supposedly turn base metals into gold and grant eternal life. The quest for the philosopher's stone is a key part of the atmosphere that surrounds the Voynich manuscript. Alchemy wasn't just about chemistry, it was a deeply spiritual and philosophical pursuit. Alchemical texts were famously obscure, written in symbolic language and illustrated with bizarre allegories: green lions devouring the sun, kings and queens dissolving in baths, serpents eating their own tails. The goal was to protect their sacred knowledge from the unworthy and the uninitiated. So, when a book like the Voynich manuscript appears at court, filled with bizarre plants, celestial diagrams, and women bathing in strange liquids, it wouldn't have seemed nearly as out of place as it does to us today. To the alchemists of Prague, it would have nodded knowingly and assumed it was just another alchemical text, perhaps a particularly potent one, written in a clever cipher to protect its world-changing secret. This is a very important point that has often missed. The book's weirdness was, in its own time, a sign of its authenticity. But here's a funny, little-known tidbit about these imperial alchemists. For all their talk of esoteric wisdom and spiritual purity, many of them were just brilliant con artists. The promise of turning lead into gold was the ultimate get-rich-quick scheme, and Emperor Rudolf, with his deep pockets and desperate desire to believe, was the perfect mark. One famous story tells of an alchemist who performed a successful transmutation for the emperor, only to be found out later he had used a specially designed crucible with a false bottom containing hidden gold dust that was released when it was heated. Rudolf, not known for his sense of humor, had the fraudster executed. This culture of brilliant deception and genuine scientific inquiry existing side by side is crucial. It gives us the two main theories for the book's origin on a silver platter. Was the Voynich manuscript a genuine esoteric text full of real, forgotten knowledge, brought to the emperor for his consideration? Or was it the ultimate calm? A beautiful, meaningless object, created by a genius forger specifically to fleece the rich, gullible emperor who was known to pay a fortune for exactly this kind of thing? This debate, whether the book is a sacred text or a cynical fraud, is a ghost that was born in these very streets of Prague. As you stand in the castle courtyard, you can almost feel the intellectual currents swirling around you. The rigorous mathematics of Kepler, the mystical symbolism of the alchemists, the emperor's own melancholic obsession with the hidden machinery of the universe. The Voynich manuscript sits perfectly at the intersection of all these things. It looks like science, it feels like magic, and it smells just a little bit like money. The book's presence in this specific time and place is no accident. It was drawn here like a moth to a very strange, very rich flame. But who brought it? The trail points away from the alchemists and toward two of the most famous and controversial figures in the whole sordid affair, a pair of Englishmen who promise not just gold, but conversation with the angels themselves. The scent of alchemy in Prague is strong, but another, more ethereal trail leads you away from the continent and across the English Channel. The name that keeps popping up in the early history of the manuscript, often whispered in the same breath as Rudolf II, is that of Dr. John Dee. Let's rewind a few years before the book's appearance in Prague. It's the Elizabethan era in England. You find yourself in a cluttered, book-lined house in a town called Mortlake, just outside London. This is the home of John Dee, one of the most brilliant and confounding figures of his age. He was a mathematical genius, a geographer who helped plan England's voyages of discovery, an astronomer, an astrologer, and the owner of the largest private library in all of England, far larger than those at Oxford or Cambridge. He was also Queen Elizabeth's trusted advisor. When she needed her coronation date calculated by the stars, or advice on matters of state whispered through the language of astrology, she called on Dee. He was, by all accounts, a man of immense learning. But he was also deeply frustrated. He believed that all the books in the world, all the human knowledge he had accumulated, were just a shadow of a deeper, divine wisdom. He wanted to read the book of nature, the original language of God, which he believed had been lost since the time of Adam. This obsession led him down a very different path from traditional scholarship. If the answers weren't in books, they must be somewhere else. So he decided to try and talk to angels. Now, this is where the story takes a sharp turn into the high strangeness that seems to follow our manuscript everywhere it goes. Dee, being a scholar and not a natural-born mystic, needed help. He needed a scryer, a medium, someone who could gaze into a crystal ball or a polished piece of black obsidian and see visions. After several failed attempts with other SCRUs, he found his charismatic, but deeply shady character, named Edward Kelly. Kelly was in many ways Dee's opposite. Where Dee was a pious, respected scholar, Kelly was a convicted forger who'd had his ears cropped as punishment, a fact he hid by wearing his hair long. He was an alchemist of dubious repute and a man with a silver tongue. But according to Dee's detailed diaries, Kelly had the gift. When he stared into Dee's shoestone, he saw things. He saw angels, glorious and terrible, who began to reveal to him, and through him to Dee, the secrets of the universe. The connection to the Voynich manuscript here is tantalizingly circumstantial. For years, Dee and Kelly traveled across Europe, visiting the courts of kings and nobles, including a long and fateful stay in Bohemia, at the court of Emperor Rudolf II. They were there at the right time. They were involved in exactly the kind of mystical, esoteric pursuits that align with the book's contents. Here is the theory that many have clung to for centuries. John Dee owned the Voynich manuscript. He believed it was a lost work of Roger Bacon, a figure he was obsessed with, and that it contained some of the angelic knowledge he was so desperately seeking. When he and Kelly were in Prague, short on cash as they often were, they sold the book to the ever-eager Emperor Rudolf for that legendary sum of 600 ducats. It's a clean, compelling story. It connects all the major players. But as with everything in this story, there's a problem. A big one. John Dee kept meticulous, almost fanatically detailed diaries. He recorded his daily activities, his finances, his prayers, his conversations with angels. And in all those thousands of pages, there is not one single, unambiguous mention of a book that matches the description of the Voynich manuscript. This is the dog that didn't bark in the night. For a man who documented owning thousands of books, why wouldn't he mention this one? The strangest of them all. Historians who doubt the D connection point to this silence as definitive proof against it. However, a quirky little counter-argument exists, a factoid that keeps the theory alive. Years after you, Wilfred Voynich, reveal the book to the world, a researcher will be studying a letter written by John Dee. In a faint, almost invisible script, written in the margin with what appears to be lemon juice, a common form of invisible ink, they find a cryptic note. It seems to refer to a book of mine that was part of a deal. Could this be it? A secret, coded reference to the sale of the Voynich manuscript. The evidence is flimsy, contested, and exactly the kind of thing that makes this mystery so addictive. So you are left with a ghost of a connection. A powerful motive, a clear opportunity, but no smoking gun. Was Dee a former owner? A key link in the chain of provenance? Or is he just a historical red herring, another fascinating character who happened to be in the right place at the right time, whose story has been grafted onto the manuscripts because it just feels so right? The academic world is, you guessed it, still arguing about it. The book's past remains as murky as the visions in Kelly's crystal ball. The shadow of John Dee and Deadwood Kelly looms large over the manuscript's early history, but as you dig deeper into their story, you uncover a specific, incredibly strange detail that seems to resonate with the book's core mystery. It's not just about their presence in Prague or their interest in esoteric texts. It's about a language, a very special language. Let's go back to Dee's study in Mortlake, with Kelly staring intently into the polished obsidian stone. According to Dee's diaries, the angels he saw didn't just show him visions, they spoke to him. And they didn't speak in English or Latin. They spoke in their own tongue, a language they called Enochian. The angels, with names like Ave and Mori Fi, would reveal the language to Kelly letter by letter, word by word. Dee would frantically write it all down. They were given a new alphabet with 21 unique, elegant characters. They were given grammar, syntax, and a vocabulary. The angels dictated entire speeches, called the keys, which were a series of poetic, apocalyptic, and deeply strange incantations. You can imagine the scene. Kelly, perhaps in a genuine rant, perhaps giving the performance of a lifetime, speaking in a strange, guttural tongue, his eyes fixed on some middle distance. And Dee, the brilliant scholar, finally getting what he always wanted, direct access to the divine, unfiltered by fallible human texts. He believed he was rediscovering the original language of creation, the tongue spoken by Adam in the Garden of Eden. Now, hold the image of the Enochian alphabet in your mind and place it alongside a page from the Voynich manuscript. The immediate visual similarity is not overwhelming. The scripts are different, but the idea behind them is uncannily similar. Both are unique, elegant alphabets, unknown to the rest of the world. Both are used to convey secret, possibly divine, knowledge. Both are associated with a small, hermetic group of people. This is where the theory gets really spicy. What if the Voynich manuscript isn't written in a human language at all? What if it's a glossa loa, a text produced by someone speaking in tongues or channeling an otherworldly entity? The theory suggests that the author of the manuscript was a mystic, perhaps in a religious ecstasy or a trance-like state, who was simply writing down the sounds they were hearing from a divine or angelic source. This would explain the effortless, correction-free flow of the script. The author wasn't thinking, they were transcribing. It would also explain the text's resistance to all forms of linguistic analysis. If it's not a human language, it wouldn't follow human language rules. It might have the statistical properties of one, just as Dee's Enochian did, because the source, be it an angel or the human subconscious, has its own patterns, but it would lack the deep, semantic structure that allows for translation. The connection to Kelly, the master channeler, becomes very strong here. Could he have created the Voynich manuscript in the same way he created Enochian? Perhaps during their travels in Europe, Kelly produced this book as another piece of evidence of his abilities, a grander, more elaborate version of the angelic conversations. He could have presented it to Dee as a long lost text he had discovered, or even channeled it himself, creating the drawings and script as part of a prolonged visionary experience. It's a compelling idea, but there's a fascinating and slightly comical counter-detail. Modern linguistic analysis of the Enochian language recorded by Dee has revealed something rather telling. While it has its own alphabet and some unique vocabulary, its grammar is suspiciously, almost laughably, similar to Elizabethan English. It's as if the angels, for all their cosmic wisdom, just happened to structure their sentences in the same way as a 16th century Londoner. Many linguists see this as a clear sign that Enochian was Kelly's own invention, his brain subconsciously applying the grammatical rules he already knew to the new words he was creating. The Voynich script, on the other hand, doesn't seem to map onto the grammar of any known language. Its structure appears to be entirely its own. This has led to a split in the channeled text theory. One side says this proves the Voynich is more authentic, a purer transmission. The other side argues it proves the opposite. The Voynich author was a more sophisticated hoaxer than Kelly, clever enough not just to invent an alphabet, but a whole new grammar to go with it. So, the whispers of angels offer no easy answers. The idea of a channeled text, a message from another realm of consciousness, is a perfect fit for the book's otherworldly feel. But it remains speculative, a theory that is, by its very nature, almost impossible to prove or disprove. The book continues to hold its silence, reflecting back whatever theories you project onto it. Is it the word of God, the babbling of a madman, or the masterwork of a con artist? You're beginning to realize is finer than a single stroke of a quill pen. The trail of the manuscript, after its brief, dazzling moment in the court of Rudolph II, goes cold for a little while. John Dee and dead, would Kelly leave Prague under a cloud of controversy? Emperor Rudolph descends further into his melancholy. The book, it seems, passes from the hands of the emperor into the possession of Jacobus Dietitnek, the keeper of the royal gardens. For a few decades, it sits quietly in his library, another strange souvenir from a strange time. Then, around the middle of the 17th century, the book surfaces again. And it lands in the hands of one of the most formidable, brilliant, and frankly, weirdest intellectuals of the entire Baroque era. His name is Athanasius Kircher. If you thought John Dee had a wide range of interests, you haven't met Kircher yet. He was a German Jesuit priest and a professor in Rome. He was a polymath, a man who wrote enormous books on literally everything: geology, optics, music theory, Egyptology, magnetism, the bubonic plague. He was one of the first people to observe microbes through a microscope and suggest they cause disease. He invented a cat piano, a bizarre musical instrument that involved a line of cats whose tails were pricked by needles to make them yell at different pitches. Don't worry, it was likely just a thought experiment and was never actually built. We hope. Kircher was, in essence, the human equivalent of the internet in the 17th century. If you had a question about anything, from the lost city of Atlantina, you wrote to Kircher. And he would write back with an answer that was always incredibly detailed, brilliantly argued, and, about half the time, completely and utterly wrong. His most famous claim to fame, or infamy, was his assertion that he had deciphered Egyptian hieroglyphs. For centuries, the meaning of the ancient Egyptian script had been lost. Kircher, using his vast knowledge of Coptic late form of the Egyptian language, produced massive volumes filled with translations of hieroglyphic texts. He saw them not as a phonetic alphabet, but as a complex system of divine symbols, each one containing deep, mystical meaning. It was all, as we now know, pure fantasy. When the Rosetta Stone was discovered over a century later, it allowed for the true decipherment of hieroglyphs and proved that Kircher's work was nothing more than incredibly imaginative guesswork. He wasn't necessarily a fraud. He was just so convinced of his own theories that he saw confirmation everywhere he looked. Now imagine you are Johannes Marcus Marci, the Prague scientist who inherited the Voynich manuscript from Dietitnek's estate. You have this impossible book. You can treat it. You know it's important. What do? You send it to the one man in the world who claims to be able to read unreadable things. You send it to Athanasius Kircher. This is what Marci did in 1666, along with that fateful cover letter you found, mentioning Rudolph II and the 600 ducats. He sent the book to Rome, hoping that the great Kirke, the man who had supposedly unlocked the secrets of the pharaohs, could finally break the Voynich code. And Kirke failed. This is one of the most telling episodes in the manuscript's history. Kirke received the book. We know this from his correspondence. He was intrigued. And then silence. He never wrote about it in any of his many books. The man who was never shy about proclaiming his intellectual victories, who built an entire career on solving ancient mysteries, was completely stumped by this quirky little vellum codex. His silence speaks volumes. A man who could translate a simple hieroglyph of a bird into a full sentence of convoluted mystical prose, to have nothing at all to say about the Voynich manuscript meant that he knew he had nothing. He couldn't even begin to guess. The book, it seems, had found its master. It had defeated the one person in its time who was arrogant enough to believe he could read anything. There's a certain karmic beauty to it. The exact details of what Kirke did or thought are, of course, debated. Did he work on it for years, growing increasingly frustrated? Or did he take one look, realize it was a hoax or beyond his abilities, and simply put it on a shelf and forget about it? We don't know for sure. Some historians speculate that the experience might have been a humbling one for him, a private failure he didn't want to advertise. The book became part of Kirke's vast personal collection, housed at the Collegio Romano in Rome. It was absorbed into his cabinet of curiosities, just another strange object among fossilized fish and perpetual motion machines. And there, after its brief tour of the esoteric hotspots of Europe, from the court of an obsessive emperor to the desk of a brilliant but deluded Jesuit, the Voynich manuscript would finally find a place to rest, a place to hide. After its brief and frustrating encounter with the great Athanasius Kirke, the Voynich manuscript does something remarkable. It disappears. Not in a dramatic, cloak and dagger way, but in the quiet, mundane way that things get lost in large old institutions. The year is around 1670th. The book is now part of the library of the Collegio Romano, the Jesuit university in Rome where Kirke worked. It's a vast collection, accumulated over centuries, filled with priceless texts, scholarly works, and the assorted weirdness that Kirke himself had collected. The manuscript is just one volume among tens of thousands. It has no title on its spine. It's small. It's unassuming. It's easy to overlook. For the next 200 years, the book effectively vanishes from the historical record. It sits on a shelf, or perhaps in a box in a forgotten corner of the library, gathering dust. The world outside changes dramatically. The age of enlightenment dawns, sweeping away the mystical worldview of Kirke and Rudolf II. Science becomes a discipline of rigor and reason. Alchemy gives way to chemistry, astrology to astronomy. The idea of a book containing angelic secrets becomes a quaint relic of a superstitious past. You can imagine the little book sleeping through it all. It sleeps through the Napoleonic Wars. It sleeps through the Industrial Revolution. It sleeps through the invention of the telegraph and the steam engine. Its strange, flowing script and its impossible flowers remain locked in a world of 15th century parchment, oblivious to the march of time. This long period of quiet obscurity is, in its own way, a stroke of incredible luck. It's probably the reason the book survives at all. Libraries, especially in times of political turmoil, are fragile places. The Collegio Romano itself faced numerous upheavals. In 1773, the entire Jesuit order was suppressed by the Pope. Their properties, including the library, were confiscated. Later, Napoleon's armies marched through Rome. The city itself became part of a new league in 1870, leading to more political and religious power struggles. During these turbulent times, many books were lost, sold off, stolen, or simply destroyed. But our little manuscript, being small, anonymous, and seemingly worthless to anyone who couldn't read it, managed to slip through the cracks every single time. It was protected by its own strangeness. The story of its survival within the Jesuit archives has its own little mystery, of course. The theory goes that during one of the periods of political uncertainty in the 19th century, When the new Italian state was seizing church property, the Jesuits secretly transferred some of their most valuable books from the main university library to the private libraries of their faculty to keep them safe from confiscation. The Voynich manuscript, still believed by some to be a valuable work by Roger Bacon, was likely part of this secret transfer. It was moved from one dusty shelf to another, its slumber barely disturbed. This is a detail that adds another layer of romance to its story, the idea of a secret society of priests guarding this mysterious text through the centuries. But the reality is probably more mundane. A librarian, following orders, likely packed it into a crate with a few dozen other old books and moved it across campus. No secret handshakes required. But even this mundane version has a fascinating question attached that historians still ponder. Who, during these 200 years, knew it was there? Surely some librarian or scholar must have stumbled upon it, opened it, then put it back. Were there any quiet, unrecorded attempts to decipher it during the 18th or 19th centuries? Did some forgotten Jesuit linguist spend his evenings trying to crack the code, only to fail, just as Kirker had? It's as if the book cast a spell of forgetfulness around itself. This long silence is crucial to its identity. It means that when the book finally re-emerges into the light of the early 20th century, it is a true time capsule. It hasn't been ray-bound or annotated or restored by well-meaning but destructive hands, as so many old manuscripts have. It arrives in the modern world in a state of near-perfect 15th century purity. The world it will wake up to is one of world wars, of psychoanalysis, of quantum physics. A world that has new tools and new ways of thinking. But the book remains unchanged. It is a visitor from a distant past, a past that is not just historically remote, but intellectually alien. The gap between its worldview and the modern one has grown into a chasm. And that chasm is precisely where its modern fame will be born, or the one holding the alarm clock. You have it. The book is yours. You've traced its ghostly path from an emperor's court, through the hands of mystics and scholars, to a long, quiet sleep in a Roman library. Now it is on your desk, and you are faced with the most pragmatic and, in some ways, most cynical question of all: what if it's all just a brilliant, beautiful fake? This is the hoax theory, and it is one of the most persistent and compelling explanations for the Voynich manuscript. It's also the one that feels both incredibly clever and deeply disappointing. Let's entertain this idea. The theory goes something like this: the manuscript is not a cipher hiding a real text, nor is it a lost language. It is a deliberately crafted object with no intrinsic meaning whatsoever. It is a work of ambience writing that looks like it should mean something but doesn't. The entire purpose of its creation was to deceive. The prime suspect in this version of the story is often you. Yes, you, Wilfred Voynich. You were, after all, a rare book dealer. A showman. A man who knew how to craft a good story. The narrative of discovering the book in a dusty chest at the Villa Mondragone is almost too perfect, too cinematic. The theory suggests that you, with your knowledge of antique materials and your flair for the dramatic, forged the manuscript yourself. You could have acquired genuine 15th century vellum. It's not impossible for a man in your line of work and then filled it with this beautiful nonsense script and quirky drawings, all to create an unsolvable mystery that would make you famous and the book priceless. It's a powerful accusation, and one that followed you for the rest of your life. But it has a few major problems. First, the sheer complexity. To create a work with such consistent and unique statistical properties, the fake language, the bizarre but internally consistent illustrations, it would have been a life's work for a genius. And you were a book dealer, not a Da Vinci-level forger. Secondly, the provenance. The letter from Marcus Marci to Kirker, dated 1666, is widely accepted by experts as genuine. It was clearly with the book long before you were born. So if it's a hoax, you weren't the hoaxer. The con is much, much older. This pushes the master forger theory back to the 16th or 15th century. Who could it have been then? The finger of suspicion often points back to the circle of John Dee and Edward Kelly. Perhaps Kelly, the convicted forger, created it to impress Dee or to sell to Rudolf II. Or maybe some other clever, unnamed alchemist cooked it up in Prague specifically to pot the gullible emperor from his 600 ducats. This is the hoax for a rich fool scenario, and it has a certain cynical logic to it. But the anti-hoax argument comes back to the same point: the complexity. In 2013, researchers published a paper showing that the manuscript's text exhibits linguistic patterns consistent with real languages, such as words being arranged in clusters related to their topic: botanical words in the botanical section, astronomical words in the astronomical section. Faking this level of subtle organization would require a level of genius far beyond just creating a funny-looking alphabet. The creator would have had to be a brilliant cryptographer, artist, and linguist all rolled into one. And if you're that smart, why not just write a real book? This brings us to a wonderfully weird, little-known version of the hoax theory. It's a bit more psychological. What if the book was a hoax meant to deceive others, but a form of self-deception? The theory posits a creator who wasn't a con artist, but someone with a unique psychological condition. Someone who was compelled to create this elaborate, private world. A kind of outsider artist centuries before the term was invented. They weren't writing for an audience, they were writing for themselves. Mapping out a universe that existed only in their own mind. This would explain the lack of corrections in your own private world. You don't make mistakes. It's a sadder, more poignant theory, suggesting the book is not a puzzle to be solved, but a symptom to be understood. Historians remain deeply, and often passionately, divided on the hoax question. It's the ultimate fork in the road. If you believe it's a hoax, then every strange feature is just another clever trick. The unreadable script is not a code, it's just nonsense. The weird plants aren't from a lost world, they're just doodles. The whole enterprise becomes a study in the art of deception. If you believe it's real, then every strange feature is a clue, a tantalizing glimpse into a completely lost world of thought. You, holding the book in your hands, have to make a choice. Is the subject a profound mystery or a profound prank? You choose to believe. You dedicate the rest of your life to the conviction that the book is genuine, that it holds a real, recoverable secret. You will spend a fortune hiring cryptographers, sending photos to scholars around the world, all in the desperate hope that someone, somewhere, can find the key. Your belief in the book's authenticity will become the engine that drives it into the 20th century and turns it from a forgotten curiosity into a global obsession. You've decided to reject the hoax theory. It just doesn't feel right. The book feels too sincere, too systematic, too full of a strange, powerful life to be a mere prank. So if it's not a hoax, what's the alternative? You're back to the two main possibilities: it's either a cipher or it's a language. Let's, for a moment, set aside the complexities of cryptography and entertain a more romantic and, in some ways, more tragic possibility. What if the Voynich manuscript is written in a real, natural language that has simply been lost to time? The idea is straightforward. You are not looking at a code. You are looking at a perfectly normal alphabet that was once understood by a whole community of people. The problem is that community, and their language with them, has vanished without a trace. The book in your hands would then be the last surviving remnant of their entire culture, an orphan manuscript. This is not as far-fetched as it might sound. History is littered with lost languages. We know of entire civilizations that thrived and then disappeared, leaving behind inscriptions we can't fully understand. Think of the Etruscan language in ancient Italy, or the scripts of the Indus Valley civilization. We have examples of their writing, but no Rosetta Stone to unlock them. The Voynich manuscript could be the ultimate example of this phenomenon. So, who could these lost people be? One compelling theory points to a connection with a group of medieval heretics. During the Middle Ages, Europe was home to many Christian sects that held beliefs that were condemned by the mainstream Catholic Church. Groups like the Cathars in southern France had their own distinct theology, rituals, and social structures. They were brutally suppressed during the Albigensian Crusade in the 13th century. Their texts were burned, their leaders executed, and their entire culture was systematically erased from history. What if the Voynich manuscript is a Cathar text? Perhaps a sacred book, written in a secret script to protect it from the eyes of the Inquisition. This would explain the strange, unchristian-looking imagery, The women in the pools could be part of a lost purification ritual. The strange plants could be part of a symbolic spiritual cosmology. It's a theory that ticks a lot of boxes. The only problem is, there's absolutely no direct evidence to support it. It's pure, albeit fascinating, speculation. Another, more recent theory, proposed by linguists Stephen Baxendleit and Nicholas Gibbs, suggests the language isn't completely lost, but rather a known language, or group of languages, written in a very unusual way. Gibbs, for example, argued that the book is a medieval medical manual, specifically on women's health, and that the script is a kind of shorthand, or abbreviation of Latin. Each glyph, he claimed, doesn't represent a letter, but a whole abbreviated word or phrase, a system used by medieval doctors to create private notes. He even offered translations for some of the plant names and illustrations. It was a headline-grabbing theory, but it was quickly and thoroughly debunked by the wider community of Voynich researchers, who pointed out that his methods were inconsistent and his translations didn't hold up to scrutiny. And here lies the great challenge of the lost language theory. If the language is truly lost, how could you ever prove it? How do you translate something with no dictionary, no grammar guide, and no other surviving examples? It's a linguistic brick wall. However, this theory brings a uniquely poignant feel to the manuscript. If it's a lost language, then the book is not a puzzle to be solved, but a memorial to be honored. It is a ghost, a beautiful, articulate ghost of a lost world, speaking its heart out, but the sound it makes is no longer audible to human ears. The tragedy is that the meaning was once there, clear as day, but the entire culture that understood it is gone forever. There's a strange detail about the manuscript's vellum pages that adds a touch of physical reality to this idea of a lost culture. When the pages were analyzed, experts noted that the vellum was well made, but not the highest quality ivory vellum you'd find in a royal Bible. It was good, serviceable stuff. The quires, or sections of pages, were numbered in a system that was somewhat unusual but functional. All this points to a creator who was a professional, or at least a highly skilled artisan, but perhaps not one working in a major, wealthy European scriptorium. This fits nicely with the idea of a provincial culture, a minority group, or a secluded community working outside the mainstream. You look at the script again. If this theory is true, then every elegant glyph is a tombstone. A tombstone for a word that no one speaks anymore. Every flowing sentence is a song that no one can sing. The book transforms from a frustrating enigma into a beautiful monument to oblivion. It's a sadder, more profound kind of mystery, and in some ways a more hopeless one. Because if the language is truly dead and buried, then the book will keep its secrets not for a century, but for eternity. Let's put aside the romantic tragedy of a lost language. It's a beautiful but perhaps too passive an explanation. Your mind, and the mind of many who will follow you, are drawn to a more active, more deliberate possibility. The manuscript isn't an artifact of a dead culture, it's a message from a living one, a message that has been deliberately hidden. You are not looking at a language. You are not looking at a code. This is the cipher theory, the idea that has captivated cryptographers for a century. The theory is simple. Beneath the strange glyphs of Voynich SE lies a real, known language, probably Latin, or a dialect of German or Italian, and the text has been scrambled according to a set of rules. The challenge is not to translate but to decrypt. Find the key, apply it, and the meaningless text will transform into plain, readable language. This immediately makes the book feel like a treasure chest. It's locked, but there's gold inside. The question is, what kind of lock are you dealing with? The first and simplest idea is a simple substitution cipher. One symbol equals one letter. A is always represented by the little gallows glyph. B is always the bench glyph, and so on. This was the first thing you and every other codebreaker tried, and it fails spectacularly. As we've seen, the word frequencies and patterns in the Voynich script just don't match those of any known European language. So, the lock is more complicated than that. The next step up in complexity is a polyalphabetic cipher, where a single glyph can represent multiple different letters, depending on its position in the word or a secret keyword. This was a common technique in the Renaissance, famously used in the Wegener cipher. This would explain some of the weird statistical properties of the text. It's a tantalizing possibility, and many complex decryption attempts have been based on this idea. But so far, no one has been able to make it work. Every time someone thinks they found a key, it produces a few plausible-looking words and then dissolves into pure gibberish. This has led to the theory of a verbose cipher or a codebook. In this scenario, each Voynich word doesn't stand for a letter, but for a whole word or concept. The creators would have had a separate book, a codebook, that listed all the real words and their corresponding Voynich ESE symbols. For example, the Voynich ESE word QOKD might mean sun, and SHOL might mean root. To decrypt the text, you would need that original codebook. If that codebook is lost, the manuscript is effectively unreadable. This is a very strong possibility, and it would explain why purely statistical methods have failed. But the most fascinating and mind-bending cipher theory involves something even more clever: steganogory. Steganogory is the art of hiding a message in plain sight, concealing the very existence of the secret. What if the Voynich text that everyone has been trying to decode is actually a meaningless decoy, a big beautiful distraction, and the real message is hidden somewhere else? Where? Perhaps it's in the subtle variations in the pen strokes, or maybe it's in the number of letters in each word. One famous theory proposed by a researcher named Prescott Currier noted that the script seems to be written into distinct dialects or hands, which he called Hand A and Hand B. Maybe the secret is in the interplay between these two hands. Another idea, which sounds like something out of a spy novel, is that the message is hidden using a cardon grill. A sheet of parchment with holes cut in it. You would lay the grill over the page of Voynich text, and only the letters visible through the holes would form the real message. The rest is just filler. This steganogory idea is incredibly compelling because it honors the intelligence of the creator. It suggests a mind so sophisticated that they didn't just hide their message, they hid the fact that there was a message. It also explains why a century of linguistic analysis has yielded so little. Everyone has been trying to pick the lock on the front door, while the real secret was written in invisible ink on the back wall. Of course, this is also where the theories start to border on conspiracy. Without the original grill or key, you can find patterns anywhere if you look hard enough. It's easy to fall down a rabbit hole of confirmation bias, seeing secret messages where there are only random variations. The academic world remains deeply skeptical of most steganographic theories for this very reason. They are, almost by definition, unfalsifiable. So the cipher theory leaves you in a state of tantalizing frustration. You feel certain there's a secret there, a treasure buried just beneath the surface. You've tried every key you can think of. You've twisted the dials of the lock in every possible combination. But the chest remains stubbornly, infuriatingly sealed. The intelligence behind the code feels palpable. It's like playing chess with a ghost. You can see their moves, you can feel their strategy, but you can never see their face or understand their ultimate goal. And the ghost, so far, is winning. You have explored the rational explanations, the hoax, the lost language, the unbreakable cipher. You've walked the paths of mainstream history and linguistics, but the book remains silent. And when the front door is locked and the windows are barred, the human mind has a tendency to start looking for secret passages, hidden tunnels, and unconventional ways in. It's time to gently open the door to the fringe. When a mystery is this profound and this persistent, it inevitably becomes a magnet for theories that are less grounded. The Voynich manuscript has attracted more than its fair share of wonderfully creative, deeply strange, and utterly improbable explanations. Let's just for a moment entertain some of them. Not because we expect to find the answer, but because they tell us something about the power of the book to ignite the human imagination. The most famous of the fringe theories is, of course, the extraterrestrial one. The idea is that the Voynich manuscript is not of human origin. It is an alien artifact, a field guide perhaps left behind by visiting botanists from another world. This would explain everything, wouldn't it? The plants are alien flora. The astronomical charts depict a different solar system. The script is an alien language. The women in the pools are who knows what they're doing, but they're doing it on another planet. It's a theory that is impossible to disprove and requires a giant leap of faith. But you can see the appeal. It neatly solves all the paradoxes. Why can't we read it? Because our brains aren't wired for it. Why are the illustrations so strange? Because they depict a non-human reality. It's a clean, simple, and incredibly dramatic solution. There's zero evidence for it, of course. The vellum is from a 15th century calf. The ink is made of oak galls and iron sulfate, all very terrestrial materials. But to the true believer, this just means the aliens were very clever at building their book out of local supplies. A slightly more down-to-earth, but equally romantic, version of this is the lost civilization theory. Not aliens from the stars, but a lost terrestrial civilization. Perhaps a remnant of Atlantis, or some other highly advanced ancient culture that existed and vanished, leaving this one single book behind as its only testament. Again, it's a beautiful idea, full of the kind of wonder you find in adventure novels. The book becomes a map to a forgotten world, a key to rediscovering lost ancient technologies and wisdom. Then we enter the realm of the truly esoteric. There are theories that the book was written by a young Leonardo da Vinci as a private exploration of his own burgeoning genius, in a script he invented to keep his thoughts safe. The timeline doesn't quite work, but it's a nice idea. There are theories that it's a magical textbook, a real-life grimoire, and that the script is not meant to be read in the conventional sense, but activated through ritual or meditation to produce a magical effect. Trying to translate, it is like trying to read a musical score as if it were a novel. You're using it for the wrong purpose. One of the more charmingly specific French theories is that the manuscript is the work of a specific, little-known 15th century Italian architect and engineer named Manuscript. He was known for his inventive, sometimes fantastical, architectural drawings and his interest in creating a utopian city. Some have suggested he created the Voynich manuscript as a sort of blueprint for the flora and social systems of his ideal world, written in a code of his own devising. This theory, while still on the fringe, is at least grounded in a specific person and place, which makes it feel a bit more plausible than a visit from Alpha Centauri. It's important to approach these theories with a sense of gentle respect and deep skepticism. They are the products of passionate, dedicated, and often very intelligent people who have been captivated by the mystery. They are a testament to the human need for answers. When faced with a perfect void of meaning, we will rush to fill it with our own stories. And the stories we tell of aliens, of ancient magic, of forgotten worlds reveal our own hopes, fears, and creative impulses. The academic world, of course, dismisses these theories out of hand. For a historian or a linguist, evidence is paramount, and these theories are, by their nature, evidence-free zones. But for us, here in the quiet of the night, we can appreciate them for what they are: beautiful, imaginative attempts to give the silent book a voice. They may not be the right voice, but they are a reminder that the book's power lies not just in the answer it might hold, but in the infinite number of questions it inspires. After wading through the cosmic and the conspiratorial, let's pull our feet back out of the deep end and plant them firmly on the ground. Sometimes the most raw explanation is the most mundane one. What if the Voynich manuscript isn't a message from aliens, a lost language, or a master forger's con job? What if it's just a notebook? This is the specific purpose theory, a more grounded and, in many ways, more intellectually satisfying approach to the puzzle. It suggests that the book is not a grand, universal text, but a highly idiosyncratic document created by one person for a very specific and personal reason. It was never meant to be understood by outsiders. Let's imagine a scenario. The year is, say, 1470th. You are a physician and a naturalist living in northern Italy. You are a brilliant but eccentric thinker. You have your own unique theories about medicine, botany, and the cosmos, theories that are at odds with the mainstream doctrines of the time. You want to record your ideas, your recipes, your observations. But you don't want your rivals to steal them or the church to condemn you for heresy. So you invent your own private writing system. It's not a complex cipher designed to be unbreakable by spies. It's just a personal shorthand. The gallows glyph might just be your personal symbol for root or to boil. The strange, flowing script is not an unknown language, it's your own handwriting, evolved over years of private note-taking into a unique, personal font. The words might not even be words but mnemonics, memory aids. The bizarre phrase QOQOQOQO might just be your way of reminding yourself to do this 3 times. In this light, the book is transformed. It's not a public proclamation, it's a private diary. The impossible plants, they might not be depictions of real plants, but symbolic representations of their properties. A plant with a castle for a flower might be your personal symbol for a plant that is good for fortifying the body. The plant with faces on its stems might be one used to treat headaches or mental illness. The drawings are not meant to be a field guide, but a visual index to your own unique system of thought. The same logic applies to the other sections. The ladies in the green goo. It could be a highly personalized guide to hydrotherapy and women's health, full of your own private symbols and theories about how the body interacts with water and herbs. The bizarre zodiacs. They could be your own astrological system, incorporating your personal beliefs about how the stars influence health. This theory has a lot going for it. It explains the lack of corrections. You don't need to correct your own personal notes. It explains the consistent but idiosyncratic nature of the script. It explains the unique and unparalleled nature of the illustrations. And it explains why no one else has ever been able to make sense of it. It's like trying to understand someone else's doodles in the margin of a textbook. They are full of meaning, but only for the person who drew them. A wonderfully specific version of this theory was proposed by a scholar named Dr. Nicholas Gibbs in a 2017 paper that briefly set the internet on fire. He argued, as we touched on before, that the manuscript was a medical textbook on women's health, and that the script was a form of medieval Latin medical shorthand. He identified plants and even claimed to decode some of the recipes. While his specific conclusions were largely rejected by the academic community as being based on flawed methodology, his core idea that the book is a practical, if highly personalized document remains very appealing. Historians who favor this more pragmatic approach often point to the physical nature of the book itself. It's small, portable. It's made of functional, not luxurious materials. It feels less like a sacred text to be placed on an altar and more like a working document to be used in a study or a laboratory. It is, in essence, a tool. If this theory is true, it makes the quest to crack the code a fool's errand. There is only a mind to understand, and since that mind has been gone for over 500 years, its secrets are likely gone with it. The book becomes a beautiful but ultimately inaccessible monument to a single, anonymous, and very created individual. It's not a message for humanity, it's a message from one person to themselves. It's a glimpse into a lost mind, a mind so unique that it created its own language to talk to itself. And that, in its own quiet way, is as profound a mystery as any alien visitation or lost civilization. For a century after you acquired it, the debate over the manuscript has been a war of words, a battle of theories fought in libraries and scholarly journals. The arguments are based on interpretation, on historical context, on linguistic analysis. But the book itself, the physical object, has been waiting patiently for a different kind of interrogation. Now let's fast forward. Leave the world of dusty books and tweed-jacketed historians, and step into the clean, quiet, and deeply analytical world of the 21st century science lab. The year is 2009. The manuscript, now housed at Yale University's Bionic Rare Book Manuscript Library, is about to have a very important appointment. Scientists are going to perform a carbon-14 dating test on it. This is a moment of truth that could shatter many of the most cherished theories. Carbon-14 is a naturally occurring radioactive isotope. Living things like the calf whose skin would become the venom and the oak tree whose galls would become the ink are constantly absorbing carbon from the atmosphere, including carbon-14. Once the organism dies, it stops absorbing, and the carbon-14 it has accumulated begins to decay at a very steady, predictable rate. By measuring the amount of carbon-14 left in a sample, scientists can determine its age with a remarkable degree of accuracy. Tiny samples, mere slivers of parchment, are carefully taken from several different pages of the manuscript. The process is nerve-wracking for the curators. You can't just undo it if you don't like the results. The samples are sent to the University of Arizona's Accelerator Mass Spectrometry Lab, one of the leading facilities in the world for this kind of work. And now everyone holds their breath. If the results come back showing the vellum is from the 19th century, then your own reputation, Wilfred, would be in tatters. The book would be proven to be a modern hoax, likely your own. The mystery would be solved, but in the most disappointing way possible. If the results come back from the 13th century, then the legend of Roger Bacon, the one Emperor Rudolph believed, would suddenly be back on the table. The entire history of the book would have to be rewritten. The results come in. The scientists, with a 95% probability, date the vellum to a very specific window between the years 1404 and 1438. Let that sink in. The early 15th century. This one single scientific fact sends a shockwave through the world of Voynich research. It is the first truly solid, indisputable piece of evidence about the book's origins, and it changes everything. Instantly, the theory that you, or any other modern figure, forged the book is obliterated. It is definitively, scientifically, an authentic medieval artifact. Your honor is cleared. The Roger Bacon theory is also definitively debunked. The book was made more than a century after he died. Emperor Rudolph was, as many suspected, sold a bill of goods. The John Dee and Edward Kelly theory is also dealt a serious blow. They couldn't have created it, as they lived in the late 16th century. They could only have owned it. This reframes their role from potential authors to, at best, historical middlemen. The carbon dating anchors the book in a very specific time period. The early 1400 seconds. This was the dawn of the Italian Renaissance. It was the age of the great humanist scholars, of renewed interest in classical texts, of explosive creativity in art and science. It was also a time of great intellectual ferment, when new ideas were challenging old orthodoxies. It's a fascinating, unplausible time for a book this strange to have been born. But science wasn't done yet. Later, the McCron Research Institute in Chicago would perform a separate analysis, this time on the inks. They concluded that the inks were made from common materials of the period, like iron gall ink. More importantly, they found no evidence that the text and the illustrations were added to the vellum at a later date. It seems the entire book, drawings, text, and all was created in one continuous process in that early 15th century window. However, the ink analysis did throw up one little quirk, a classic Voynich-style anomaly. One analysis suggested that the ink was applied to the parchment not long after the vellum was made. But another slightly different analysis of the ink's composition seemed to hint that it might have been made according to a recipe that was more common a century or two later. This discrepancy is still a subject of technical debate among experts. It's a small detail, but a perfect example of how even when science gives the manuscript an answer, it leaves behind a new, more subtle question. The carbon dating revelation was a watershed moment. It didn't solve the mystery of the book's meaning, but it silenced a century of speculation about its age and authenticity. It proved that we are dealing with a genuine, 600-year-old enigma. The book is not a modern prank. It is a true ghost from the past. And now, armed with this certainty, a new generation of investigators, armed with a new kind of tool, would be ready to take up the hunt. The carbon dating may have anchored the book in the past, but the next wave of investigation would come from the heart of the future. After the codebreakers of World War I laid down their pencils, a new kind of cryptogory emerged, one that didn't rely on intuition and painstaking manual analysis alone. It was time to bring in the computers. Beginning in the late 20th century and accelerating into the 21st, computer scientists and computational linguists started to turn their powerful algorithms on the Voynich script. The hope was that a machine, capable of processing the entire 240-page text in a fraction of a second, could see patterns that were invisible to the human eye. You can imagine a young programmer sitting in a darkened room, the only light coming from a screen filled with glowing green Voynich glyphs. They have digitized the entire manuscript, transcribing it into a special machine-readable alphabet called EVA Extensible Voynich Alphabet. The full text of the book is now a data file, and they can unleash the full power of modern data science upon it. The first thing the computers did was confirm, with overwhelming statistical force, what the early codebreakers had suspected. The text is not random gibberish. It has a complex and highly structured nature. The computers confirmed that it obeys Zipf's law. They confirmed the strange rules about which letters can and cannot sit next to each other. They mapped the entropy of the text, its predictability, and found it sat in that tantalizing zone of language-like complexity. But then, the computers started to find things that were even stranger. In the 1970s, a physicist named William Bennett used an early computer program to analyze the text. He found that the script had very, very low conditional entropy. In simple terms, this means it has very few combinations of letters. In English, you can have TR or TH or TI. In Voynich ESC, it's as if a character like you with the very little variation. The text is, in some ways, incredibly repetitive and predictable on a character-by-character level, which is not typical of natural languages. This led Bennett to conclude that it was likely a glossolalia, or speaking in tongues text, not a true language. More recently, artificial intelligence and machine learning have entered the fray. In 2018, a team of Canadian computer scientists used a sophisticated AI algorithm to try and decipher the manuscript. They fed the AI the text of the Voynich and told it to try and figure out the underlying language on its own. The AI came back with a stunning conclusion. It claimed the language was most likely Hebrew, and that it was scrambled using a complex anagramming cipher. It even produced a translation of the first sentence, which reads something like she made recommendations to the priest, man of the house and me and people. The news went viral. For a brief, shining moment, it seemed the mystery was solved. The computers had done it. But then, Hebrew scholars and linguists took a closer look. And they found the AI's work to be less than convincing. The Hebrew it found was oft ungrammatically incorrect, and the process seemed to involve the AI having a lot of flexibility in how it interpreted the words. The consensus quickly became that the AI had simply found what it was programmed to find: patterns. It was a classic case of a machine seeing a face in the clouds. The breakthrough was announced, but quietly retracted a short time later. This episode is a perfect parable for the role of computers in the Voynich mystery. They are incredibly powerful tools for finding patterns. They can analyze, quantify, and visualize the book's structure in ways you, Wilfred, could never have dreamed of. But they lack one crucial thing: human context. They don't understand history, culture, or symbolism. They can tell you that a pattern exists, but they can't tell you why. Here's a small, nerdy detail that the computers helped uncover. They confirmed that the two hands or dialects that Prescott Currier identified, Hande and Hanbei, are statistically real. The sections written in Hande have slightly different word frequencies and patterns than the sections in Hanbei. But the AI can't tell us if this means they were to different authors, or one author writing at different times, or one author using two different types of cipher for different topics. The data gives us a new clue, but not the answer. So the hunt continues. Every year, new algorithms are thrown at the problem. Some try to link the script to lost Turkic languages, others to Proto-Romance dialects. Each attempt is a new, complex, and fascinating failure. The book seems to be a perfect cryptographic comedian, able to mimic the statistical properties of a real language just enough to fool both human and artificial minds, but never enough to actually give up its secrets. The computers have joined the long line of brilliant failures, from Kirker to Friedman. The ghost in the machine has met the ghost in the manuscript, and so far, the manuscript is winning. The computer scientists have analyzed the structure of the text, but there's another branch of modern science that can offer clues. Let's return to the lab, but this time, we're not looking at the language, we're looking at the physical ingredients. What can the chemistry of the book itself tell us about the person, or people, who made it? You are standing in a clean, brightly lit conservation lab. On a sterile table lies the manuscript, open to one of its colorful botanical pages. A scientist in a white coat leans over it, but not with a magnifying glass. They are using advanced techniques like X-ray fluorescence, RF and energy dispersive X-ray spectroscopy, DES. These are non-destructive methods that can analyze the elemental composition of the inks and pigments without damaging the precious page. It's like giving the book a medical scan. The first thing they investigate are the pigments, the colors used to bring the impossible plants and strange bathing pools to life. The results are both revealing and a little bit anticlimactic. The palette is surprisingly simple. The red is red ochre, a common iron-based mineral pigment. The brown is also an earth pigment. The white is likely a mix of calcite and an egg-based binder, essentially a simple tempera paint. The blue and green are a bit more interesting. The green is a basic copper-based pigment, like verdurix, which was common but also notoriously unstable, which could explain some of the fading and color changes over the centuries. The blue is azurite, another copper-based mineral. These were all standard workaday materials for a 15th century artist or scribe. There are no exotic, expensive materials like lapis lazuli, which would have been ground up to make brilliant ultramarine blue for a truly luxurious manuscript. This chemical fingerprint tells a story. The creator of the manuscript was not a wealthy prince or the head of a major monastery. They were working with a budget. They were using the materials that were readily available to an ordinary craftsman or scholar of the time. This is a powerful argument against the hoax for a ritual theory. If you were trying to create a convincing fake to sell to an emperor for a fortune, wouldn't you splash out on some expensive pigments to make it look more impressive? The humble nature of the material suggests a more practical, less ostentatious purpose. Then there is the analysis of the ink used for the script itself. It's confirmed to be iron gall ink, the standard writing ink used in Europe for over 1,000 years. It was made by mixing tannins from oak, galls, the little round growths on oak trees caused by wasps, with iron sulfate. This is entirely consistent with a 15th century origin, but the chemical analysis of the ink revealed a stranger, more subtle clue. A team of researchers found that the different components of the ink, the iron, the sulfur, the copper, the chlorine, were present in slightly different ratios in different parts of the manuscript. For example, the ink used to write hand A text has a slightly different chemical signature than the ink used for hand B. What does this mean? Historians are still debating this, of course. It could mean that there were two different scribes who each mixed their own batch of ink. Or it could mean it was one scribe who wrote the book over a long period of time, using ink from different batches made on different days. Or, most tantalizingly, it could mean the scribe was deliberately using different inks for different inks for different inks for different sections, perhaps as a form of hidden marking or coding. It's a classic Voynich clue, a firm piece of data that opens up three new, contradictory possibilities. One of the most humanizing details to come from this forensic analysis is the discovery of what is not in the book. There is no evidence of gold or silver leaf, which were common in high-end illuminated manuscripts. There is also very little evidence of extensive planning or underdrawing. Most medieval illuminators would sketch out their designs in charcoal or lead point before applying the final paint. The Voynich artist seems to have just gone for it, painting directly onto the page with a confident, fluid hand. This reinforces the idea of a private work, a document created with speed and confidence rather than laborious, public-facing perfection. The creator was not trying to impress a patron with glittering gold. They were trying to get their ideas down on the page. So the chemical analysis paints a picture of the creator. They were not a master forger trying to create a luxury item. They were a skilled, confident artisan or scholar working with common, everyday materials. They were methodical, mixing different batches of ink but also spontaneous, painting their strange visions directly onto the page. The science has not given us a name, but it has given us a shadow, a profile of the anonymous genius behind the work. They feel less like a ghost now, and more like a real, flesh and blood person sitting at a wooden desk in the early 15th century, quill in hand, with a universe of strange ideas waiting to be born. After all the high-tech analysis, the linguistic debates, and the historical deep dives, let's do something simple. Let's just look at the book again, but this time, let's look closer. Forget the grand, baffling illustrations and the impenetrable walls of text. Let's look in the corners. Let's look in the margins. Because that's where the book sometimes whispers its tiniest, most human secret. You're looking at a digital, high-resolution scan of a page from the herbal section. You can zoom in until you can see the very fibers of the vellum. As you're examining the elegant drawing of an impossible flower, you notice something in the white space near the root. It's a tiny, faint drawing, no bigger than your thumbnail. It looks like a human face, drawn in profile. It's not part of the main illustration. It's just a little doodle, almost an afterthought. You start to hunt for more, and you find them, scattered throughout the manuscript, hidden in the margins or tucked away inside the loops of the larger drawings, are tiny, secondary figures. On one of the astronomical pages, nestled amongst the stars, is a minuscule drawing of a crab. On another page, you find a little archer, complete with a bow and arrow. In the section that looks like recipes, you find a small but clear drawing of what looks like a dragon's head, breathing fire. These are not the polished, confident drawings of the main illustrations. They are cruder, sketch IR. They feel different. This has led to one of the most intriguing and contested theories about the book's creation, the idea of multiple authors, or at least, multiple hands contributing at different times. The theory goes that the main text and illustrations were done by one person, the original 15th century creator, but then, at some later date, perhaps in the 16th or 17th century, a later owner of the book went through it and added their own notes and doodles in the margins. The little faces, the crab, the archer, these could be the medieval equivalent of a student doodling in their textbook. The archer might just be a visual note, pointing to the constellation's activities. The crab to Cancer. It could be a later owner's attempt to make sense of the book, to add their own layer of interpretation on top of the original mystery. But, as always with the Voynich, there's a counter-theory. What if the doodles were done by the original author? Perhaps they were little memory aids, or private jokes. Maybe the dragon head was the author's personal symbol for a specific ingredient, like distilled spirits or something that bites. This would make the book even more of a private, idiosyncratic document. And then there are the page numbers. In the top right corner of many pages, you can see page numbers. They are not in the strange Voynich script. They are in familiar Arabic numerals. But handwriting analysis suggests they were added much later, probably in the 16th century or even later. This proves the book was in the hands of someone who tried to organize it, to tame it long before you, Wilfrid, ever found it. But here is a wonderfully obscure and fascinating detail. There's another set of numbers in the book. The quires, the folded sections of parchment that make up the book, are also numbered. This was a common practice for bookbinders. But these quire numbers are written in a style that appears to be contemporary with the original creation of the book. And they are strange. They follow a sequence, but with some odd little flourishes and symbols attached to them that are not standard. It's another tiny, unique fingerprint left by the original creator, a clue that has been analyzed endlessly by scholars. It's a system of organization, but one that follows its own private, slightly off-kilter logic. Perhaps the most human and poignant of all these marginalia is something you can only see with ultraviolet light. On the final page of the manuscript, a later owner has written a line of text. It's faint and heavily erased, but under UV light, you can just make out a few words. They appear to be in a form of 15th century German, and though the full sentence is a subject of fierce debate, it seems to be a plea or a prayer. One contested translation reads something like, "God help me." Was this an owner driven to despair by their inability to read the book? Or was it just a random, unrelated note on a conveniently blank page? We don't know. But it's a haunting little message, a voice of frustration echoing down the centuries. It's a reminder that you are not the first person to have been driven half-mad by this beautiful silent book. You are just the latest in a long line. Let's step away from the manuscript itself and look at the world that has grown up around it. Because in the century since you, Wilfrid, brought it out of obscurity, the book has achieved something remarkable. It has created its own community. It has inspired a global, unofficial, and often obsessive army of sleuths. You are no longer alone in your study. You are now connected, via the magic of the internet, to a sprawling network of people from every walk of life, all united by one single, improbable passion: solving the Voynich manuscript. You log onto a forum, a place like Voynich Ninja, one of the central hubs for modern research. The page is a chaotic of obsession. You see professional linguists from prestigious universities arguing in one thread. In another, a retired engineer from Ohio is posting a complex statistical analysis he ran on his home computer. A history student from Japan is sharing her research on 15th century watermarks. An artist from Brazil is discussing the symbolic meaning of the plant drawings. This is the new phase of the investigation. It's no longer the domain of a few isolated scholars. It's a crowdsourced, open-source mystery. The high-resolution scans of the manuscript held by Yale University are freely available to anyone with an internet connection. The tools of research are no longer locked away in ivory towers. The atmosphere in this community is a unique blend of intense collaboration and fierce rivalry. Everyone is working towards the same goal, and information is shared freely. If someone discovers a new pattern or a new historical parallel, they post it for everyone to see and critique. This has accelerated the pace of research dramatically, debunking bad theories faster and stress-testing new ones with incredible rigor. But there's also a competitive edge. Everyone secretly wants to be the one who finally cracks it. The fame would be immense. You would go down in history as the person who solved the world's most mysterious book. This ambition fuels countless hours of late-night research in dark to pursue the most obscure and unlikely leads. You browse through the forum posts. You see discussions of incredible detail. People argue about the precise species of wasp that might have created the oak galls used for the ink. They debate the meaning of a single, ambiguous stroke on a single letter on page 78. It is a level of scrutiny that is almost unimaginable, a collective focus of thousands of minds on one small, quiet object. This global army has produced some fascinating, if not definitive, findings. It was this community that did much of the work in debunking Nicholas Gibbs's Latin shorthand theory, pointing out flaws in his translations within hours of his paper being published. It is this community that continues to build and refine the transcription of the text, creating ever more accurate data sets for the computers to analyze. But this community also has its share of characters. For every sober-minded academic, there is a passionate amateur with a grand, all-encompassing theory that they are convinced is the one true answer. You will find people who believe the book is a map to the Holy Grail, a coded message from Shakespeare, or a vegetarian cookbook from the lost city of Atlantis. The forums are a place of both brilliant insight and spectacular delusion. It's a very human mix. And this is where a subtle, modern debate has emerged. Is this crowdsourced approach a good thing? On the one hand, it has democratized the research and brought thousands of new eyes to the problem. On the other hand, it has created a lot of noise. For every solid piece of research, there are a dozen half-baked theories that muddy the waters and lead reporters to announce that the manuscript has been solved every 6 months. Some academics have grown weary of the constant flood of amateur decipherers and have retreated from the public discussion. But there is something undeniably beautiful about this global effort. It's a testament to the power of a good mystery. The Voynich manuscript has become a kind of intellectual Mount Everest, a challenge that people feel compelled to take on. Not for money, but for the sheer joy of the climb. It connects a medievalist in Germany with a programmer in India and a botanist in Canada. They may never meet, but they are all part of the same strange, wonderful club. You, Wilfred, started this process a century ago by sending photostats to a handful of scholars. You would be stunned to see what your small act of intellectual curiosity has blossomed into. The book is no longer just your secret. It belongs to the world now, and the world is not giving up on it. We've walked along a winding path together. We've stood in the court of a mad emperor, listened for the whispers of angels, and peered over the shoulders of scientists and code breakers. We've entertained theories of aliens and hoaxes, of lost languages and private diaries. And after all this, where are we? We are, in a sense, right back where we started. The book is still silent. The code, if there is one, remains unbroken. The meaning, if there is one, remains a perfect mystery. And now, as we near the end of our journey, it's time to ask a different kind of question. What if the point of the Voynich manuscript isn't the answer? What if its true value lies in the fact that it is, and has remained, so beautifully, perfectly unsolved? Think about it. Imagine for a moment that tomorrow someone genuinely cracks it. A scholar discovers a long-lost letter that contains the key to the cipher. They run that turns out to be a meticulously detailed record of herb prices in a small Italian town. Or a farmer's almanac, or a rather boring diary of a 15th century merchant complaining about his taxes. The mystery would be over. The global army of sleuths would pack up their digital tools and go home. The forums would fall silent. The book, currently one of the most famous and intriguing manuscripts in the world, would become a minor historical footnote, a curiosity of interest only to a handful of specialized economic historians. Its magic would evaporate in an instant. The silence that makes it so loud would be filled with a mundane, disappointing drone. There is a profound beauty in an unsolved puzzle. A solved puzzle is a dead thing. It is a story that has been finished, but an unsolved puzzle is alive. It is a space for the imagination to play. It is a mirror that reflects the ingenuity, the hopes, and the obsessions of everyone who looks into it. The Voynich manuscript has become a kind of cultural touchstone for the very idea of an unsolvable problem. It's a testament to the fact that there are still things in this world, even in our age of information and artificial intelligence, that we simply do not understand. And there is a certain humility, a certain wonder admission. It reminds us that for all our knowledge, the past still holds secrets that it is not yet ready to give up. This is a point that many of the most dedicated modern researchers, even as they worked tirelessly to find a solution, will quietly admit. The curator of the Bionic Library, where the manuscript is housed, has often said that he secretly hopes it is never solved. He understands that the questions the book inspires are far more interesting and productive than any single answer could ever be. The book has forced us to develop new scientific techniques. It has pushed the boundaries of computational linguistics. It has inspired art, music, and literature. It has created a global community of passionate thinkers. All of this is a product of its silence. If it had spoken clearly from the beginning, it would have done none of these things. It would have just been another old book. So, perhaps the true meaning of the Voynich manuscript is not hidden in its unreadable script. Perhaps the meaning is what it does to us. It challenges our assumptions. It fires our curiosity. It brings people together in a shared quest for knowledge. It is a catalyst for imagination. You can look at the book in a new light now. It is not a failure of understanding on our part. It is a triumph of mystery on the book's part. It has successfully guarded its secret, if it has won for 600 years. It has defeated emperors, alchemists, spies, and supercomputers. It has earned its silence. Let's not see the book as a source of frustration. Let's see it as a gift. A perfect, self-contained universe of wonder that asks nothing of us but to look, to imagine, and to appreciate the profound, simple beauty of a question that has no answer. It is a quiet rebellion against a world that demands that everything be known, categorized, and explained. The Voynich manuscript simply is, and that is more than enough. And so we come to the end of our story, which is, of course, no end at all. Let's return to you, Wilfred Voynich, sitting in your study late at night. The fire in the hearth has burned down to glowing embers. The city outside is finally, truly asleep. The journey through the books, past and its possible futures, is over, and you are left, once again, with the object itself. You reach out and gently pull the book towards you. The vellum cover feels cool and smooth under your fingertips, just as it did when you first lifted it from that dusty chest in the Villa Mondragone. It feels ancient, but not tired. It feels full of a patient, quiet energy. You don't try to read it anymore. Not tonight. You've looked for answers in its script, in its drawings, in its history, in the minds of others. You've chased its ghost across centuries and continents. And now, you're content to just let it be. You open it to a random page. Your eyes fall upon one of botanical illustrations. A plant with soft, bell-shaped flowers of an impossible blue, its leaves a gentle, swirling pattern. The strange, Elegant script flows around it like a stream around a beautiful stone. You are not trying to identify the plant or decipher the words. You are simply appreciating the artistry. The confident lines, the vivid, enduring color, the sheer unapologetic strangeness of it all. You realize that for all the frustration it has caused you, the book has also been a source of profound wonder. It has been your constant companion, your great intellectual puzzle, the central mystery of your life. It has connected you to emperors and alchemists, to scholars you've never met, and to future generations you will never know. In a way, this silent book has been the most articulate thing you've ever encountered. It has taught you a valuable lesson. Some things are not meant to be conquered. Some secrets are not meant to be known. Some stories are not meant to have an ending. The book is a locked room, but maybe the point isn't to break down the door. Maybe the point is to appreciate the beauty of the door itself, to wonder about the shape of the keyhole, and to listen to the silence on the other side. You close the cover gently. The soft sound of the vellum pages settling against each other is the only noise in the room. You tie the simple cord that holds it shut. The secret is safe again. The book is whole, complete, a perfect circle of mystery. You purchased this book from the Jesuits, who needed money to repair their villa. It's a strange thought. For all its esoteric grandeur, the book's journey into the modern world was precipitated by something as mundane as a leaky roof. It's a humble, grounding detail that makes the whole story feel real. You leave the book on your desk. As you turn down the lamp, the room is plunged into a soft, comfortable darkness. But the book seems to hold a faint light of its own, the pale vellum glowing in the gloom. It is waiting. It waited 200 years in a library in Rome. It can wait for the next person to pick it up, for the next generation to try their luck, to project their own hopes and theories onto its silent, beautiful pages. Its story is not over. Here in the quiet, waiting for the next chapter to be written by those who, like you, dare to look inside and ask what if. The book holds its silence, and in that silence, it holds everything. And now the story itself comes to rest, settling like dust in the quiet corners of your mind. The little book is closed, its secrets tucked away once more between its pale, soft covers. The images of impossible flowers and celestial pools begin to fade, their vivid colors softening, blurring at the edges, as if dissolving into a dream. You can almost feel the gentle weight of that book in your own hands, a small, quiet object that holds a universe of questions. But the questions don't need answers anymore. They are just soft shapes, drifting peacefully in the darkness behind your eyes. The need to know, to solve, to understand, all of that can melt away now. There is only the quiet, the comfort, and the gentle, rhythmic hum of the night. The story has been told, and its only purpose was to walk with you for a while, to be a soft companion on your path towards slumber. And now, at the end of that path, you can let it go. All that is left is the deep, peaceful silence, a soft blanket for your mind to rest beneath. The mystery is at peace. And so are you. Our journey together tonight ends here in this quiet place. Should you need another tale to accompany you further into rest, my library of stories is always open for you. May your dreams be kind. Good night.